The God Valley incident is one of the most horrible events in all of One Piece, but it only happened because of one man, Saint Figarland Garling, yet you may be both surprised and disgusted by his true motives. 2 years before the incident, Garling had gone on a simple mission to God Valley, giving them an offer to join the world government. The Kingdom of God Valley refused this offer, yet Garling was not deterred. If God Valley was not going to agree to his demands, Garling was just going to force them by deciding that the island was going to be the stage of the Celestial Dragon's next native hunting competition. A game where the country would not only be invaded by the government, but the entire population would serve as sport in the Celestial Dragon's countrywide murder contest. This for Garling wasn't however just petty revenge because God Valley had refused him, but he had a very specific reason for subjugating the island to this fate. When he had originally gone to God Valley, Garling had discovered a woman who fell in love with him, and he had decided to father children with this woman. When the island 2 years later got targeted by the government, Garling personally sought these children out and was delighted at their birth, but then proceeded to murder their mother in cold blood. This had very likely been Garling's plan from the start, but more importantly, this was also likely the true cause of the God Valley incident. These children were not conceived by accident, as we know that Garling after the incident took Shamrock with him and raised him in the Holy Land as his son. What I believe is that Garling specifically wanted the native hunting competition to happen in the birthland of his children, where the competition would wipe out any connection between them and their homeland, and allow Garling to turn his sons into devoted members of the Celestial Dragons. As for why Garling was so interested in having children with this woman, it could be a way bigger twist than you think. I recently made a video about this, where I break down why this woman was likely very literally of Joy Boy's lineage, and that Garling did everything that he did to get the power of this bloodline for the world government. What is truly sickening about Garling's actions is that he isn't just a mad dog who hurts people on a whim, but a man with a calculating mind, whose all decisions were based in pure logic. When this woman talked to Garling, she was genuinely happy, having both missed him and being excited to show her sons their father. Even though Garling had likely always planned on killing her, this shows that he had actually been affectionate to her up to this point, where this woman actually thought the two of them were in love. This was however just a facade. Garling pretending to love this woman was only done to serve his interests, where it ensured that his children would be born and be safe on God Valley until his return. After this had been accomplished, this woman would have served her purpose, and Garling could just kill her along with the rest of her country and take the children with him, as if a place like God Valley had never existed. One could say that this is nothing new, where Garling isn't much different from the rest of the Celestial Dragons, as they all simply see non-Celestial Dragons as scum to be killed or enslaved on a whim. Yet, from what we've now learned of him, I think Garling is arguably even worse than the rest of his people. Garling doesn't just commit evil acts like it's business, but he also takes pleasure from it, where he's genuinely gleeful at the idea of subjecting his children's birthland to a genocide. Garling also does not just kill the mother of his children and be done with it, but he makes sure to tell her in her final moments that he never actually loved her, that he's going to take her children, kill all her people, and go away with another woman. These are acts of pure sadism from Garling, where he clearly isn't just a man who does what he thinks is necessary, but genuinely enjoys hurting others. One way to view the Celestial Dragons is that their evil is simply the product of their environment, where they are horrible only because they know so little about the world and other people, where for example, most of the Celestial Dragons do not even know their own history. We have also seen several times in the story that Celestial Dragons who learn more about the world actually try to become good people and to repent their actions. What is however chilling is that Garling is in many ways an exception to this. Unlike the other Celestial Dragons whose lives are just one big vacation, Garling is actually charged with handling the world government's affairs, and he has seemingly been around the world to see this through. Garling is also considerably more intelligent and knowledgeable about the world than the rest of his people, and as these scenes with Shanks' mother show, Garling is actually capable of acting like a good person if he wants. This in many ways makes Garling significantly worse than the rest of the Celestial Dragons, where he in fact fully understands the consequences of his actions, yet does them anyway with no remorse. While Garling says that what he does is just in the interests of the world government, his actions are also motivated just by his own personal gain. After taking care of his business with Shanks and Shamrock, Garling proceeded to personally participate in the native hunting competition. His reason for doing this was just so that he could force Shakky, a woman kidnapped against her will, to marry him. But even beyond this, Garling simply enjoyed killing the natives for its own sake, where even though he wanted to win the tournament to get Shakky, Garling was willing to take points away from himself during the competition just to increase the challenge. Even though he's only appeared in less than 10 chapters of the story, Garling has already shown that he's one of the absolute most immoral characters in all of One Piece, where it is genuinely hard to think of any evil act we've seen in the story that Garling wouldn't have been willing to go through. Yet, whether Garling has a claim as being the most evil character in One Piece, I'm not entirely sold. Ultimately, whether someone commits evil acts out of sadism or other vile reasons matters little to the actual victims, and when it comes to the simple amount of people who've suffered, Garling still handily loses to someone like Imu, who is at the end of the day responsible for most of the world government's crimes for a period of over 800 years, and who seemingly committed countless atrocities on the level of God Valley throughout his life. In terms of the amount of human suffering caused by a character, Garling could also not just lose to Imu, but also just to the likes of Kaido and Doflamingo, whose empires wreaked havoc on the world for years and decades, whereas God Valley, despite all its horror, was just a single event. What's more, God Valley itself was ultimately just an unlucky country, where even if Garling had not suggested it as the government's next target, the native hunting competition would have still happened, but just on another island. Still, I'd argue that anyone reading One Piece has the right to be more disgusted by Garling than with the other villains in the story. Even if the scale isn't the same, Garling's crimes are monstrous on a more personal level. Even though Shanks' mom is just one victim, what Garling did to her is so vile that thinking about it can make one's stomach turn way more than something huge like Imu destroying Lucia Kingdom. While what Imu did was horrible, Garling's actions could be said to go against much deeper core values held by most people. What is also very tragic about what Garling did is that there really is no way for anyone to truly avenge this woman, as both Shanks and Shamrock are too young to have any memories of her. Everyone who truly knew this woman could have well died at God Valley. In a way, this means that Garling did truly kill her, where there is possibly no one, not even her own children, to remember her. There's also one more victim of Garling's that I haven't really focused on that much, and it is Shamrock. In many ways, Shanks really is the one who got off easy of the two, where he got a loving home on Roger's ship and was genuinely cared for by his crewmates. Shamrock meanwhile was seemingly given the role Garling had always planned for him since before he was even born, where he was brainwashed just to be a tool for the government. When we skip forward to the present story, the damage has also clearly already been done, where Shamrock has become a devoted member of the Celestial Dragons, and he has also adopted much of his father's sadism. This is part of why I personally really like the Figarland family's introduction to the story. Their introduction not only gave us really compelling new villains like Garling and Shamrock in the final saga, but it also makes you ask all these questions about how much a person's upbringing and environment shape who they are. Still, I think that's enough Garling talk for now, as a lot of other interesting things happened in this chapter besides Shanks' dad revealing just how much of a scoundrel he is. It is really looking like the man who for all intents and purposes saved Shanks by getting him on Roger's ship was Dragon. I last year made a video predicting that Dragon was a marine at God Valley, and that this was the event that made him turn on the government. And you can watch it by clicking here, since it has now become extremely relevant. I did not, however, predict this connection between Dragon and Shanks, and it genuinely makes me wonder if the history between these two goes even deeper. Shanks would have been too young to remember Dragon, and we know from volume 4 billion that the Roger pirates had no idea of the part he played in Shanks getting on their ship. Still, there are two very interesting later connections between Shanks and Dragon in this story. One is that we know both of them attended Roger's execution. Two is that Shanks spent an entire year in the Goa Kingdom, which is not just Luffy's home country, but also Dragon's home country, which Dragon seemingly visited frequently in secret during Luffy's childhood. It is not at all impossible that after God Valley, Shanks and Dragon actually met during these or other points in time. Because Dragon was the last person who was with Shanks' mother, it could be something like that he saw it as his responsibility to tell Shanks about her. I actually really like the idea that the two met during Roger's execution, because it could be in line with this also being the moment when Shanks decided that he was not going after the One Piece just yet, which could mean that Shanks at this point instead decided to find out his true lineage. If Shanks does know that Dragon saved him, I would also not be surprised if Shanks to this day sees Dragon as his hero. For example, on both Shanks' ships, he has a figurehead of a dragon at the front, where I initially thought this was a reference to Shanks' connection with Elbaf, but it could actually be him showing respect to his savior. What I am hoping for, however, is that Shanks in Chapter 1 had no idea that Luffy was Dragon's son. To me, the most interesting outcome would be if Shanks had no idea about Luffy's lineage, or him being the next Joy Boy, or even about the possible importance of the Will of D. The way I see it, it just makes for the most powerful story if Luffy to Shanks was just a kid who reminded him of Roger, and that this was all it took for Shanks to give up his arm and to make his promise with Luffy. While Dragon is seemingly the one who saved Shanks from God Valley, I am still not sure who is the one who ended up saving Teach. He was only 2 years old at this point, so I would assume that he had to get some help to get off the island. Yet we also already know it at least wasn't Roger or Whitebeard who helped him. It is also unlikely to have been anyone with the government, since they pretty much gave Teach the death warrant by making him a part of the native hunting competition. The simplest answer is honestly probably Kuma, since we know he evacuated hundreds of people off the island with his devil fruit. There could be something resembling substance here, where Kuma and Blackbeard were both originally introduced in Jaya, and Kuma later somewhat knowingly talked about Teach in Thriller Bark. Just like with Shanks and Dragon though, Teach naturally would have no memories of Kuma having been the one who saved him. I think the next most likely candidate to have saved Teach after Kuma would probably be just a random member of the Rocks Pirates, like Ochoku or Silveraxe or something, where they for whatever reason took baby Teach with them when fleeing God Valley, and could have even later raised him, even though Sebek kept it a secret. If they later realized this was Sebek's kid, this could also explain how Teach learned of his lineage. Naturally, no matter who took him off the island, Teach did later become an orphan. What is however interesting is that something had to happen in the first 12 years of Teach's life before he joined Whitebeard, where according to Teach's own words, he was at this point already looking for the Yami Yami no Mi. I'm just going to throw out a wild guess here and say that one of the surviving Rocks pirates may have raised Blackbeard after God Valley and told him about Sebek and the Yami Yami no Mi, but that they were a very bad parent, which caused Teach to have a very unhappy childhood, and for him to later run off. It also really would not surprise me if Lafitte is revealed to have been with Teach since very early on, since the two give the air that they share an incredibly strong bond. Lafitte was also conveniently born in the West Blue, which if you want more wild speculation, could even mean that he too was one of the civilians who escaped God Valley. This revelation about Davy Jones not only being Sebek and Teach's forefather, but also a member of the D Clan, very heavily paints him as having been one of the great ancient enemies of the world government. Imu has confirmed that the D Clan are the descendants of his old enemies, but if Lily is any example, it is possible that some of them already lived during the Void Century. Since Joy Boy has also been confirmed as the first pirate in history, this would mean that Davy Jones was active sometime after his time. I've heard the theory that Joy Boy literally was Davy Jones, but personally, I'm not too sure about that. At least to me, it is hard to imagine that someone like Joy Boy inspired a tradition like the Davy Back games, where it seems way more cutthroat than anything we've heard about him. I also feel like the One Piece lore is a lot richer if we have several legendary figures, rather than everything and everyone revolving so hard around Nika and Joy Boy. I think the most interesting outcome would be if Davy Jones was simply a pirate who lived after the Void Century, yet still hundreds of years before the current story, and just like Joy Boy and Sebek, was a legendary figure of his own who stood up against Imu. This would actually align with Whitebeard's last words, where he said that somebody will come that will carry centuries of history on their shoulders and challenge the entire world to a fight. In other words, the final war wouldn't just be a repeat of Joy Boy's era, but of all the different eras, where pirates have been fighting against the world throughout their existence, and it will finally be Luffy who will bring this ancient battle to a close. For the record, Oda actually drew a picture of Davy Jones in an SPS all the way back during the Long Ring Longland arc. This chapter did in many ways give Sebek's character a lot more depth, where unlike someone like Garling, Sebek surprisingly does care about the well-being of his family. What is even more surprising though, is that Sebek talks like he knows that he is walking to his own death, where he has already prioritized the safety of his family over his own dreams of world conquest. I suppose the reason why Sebek is so pessimistic is that he had simply not yet done the necessary preparation to challenge the government, where he may have not yet had the devil fruits he was looking for. He did not have Harald's support or Galela, and one of his guys had even been killed during Shakky's kidnapping. What I do find very interesting is that Roger and Sebek ended up fighting each other on God Valley in the end, even though they both seemingly went there to rescue Shakky. I really cannot believe that they would have in that situation still fought over Shakky's affection, where there were literally Gorosei God's Knights and who knows who else running around the island. I am actually starting to believe that Sebek did something crazy, like going berserk on God Valley, where both Roger and Garp would have realized that he had to go down. If there was a trigger for this, I'd also assume it was because of something that happened to Sebek's wife. By the way, does anyone have any idea what the significance of Sebek choosing Rocks of all things as his fake name could be? I guess the simplest one would be that Davy Jones is said to reside at the bottom of the sea, and rocks are the first thing that come to mind when you think of something that sinks. Or maybe it's just a reference to Sebek himself having huge stones. I don't know. Harald telling his men not to interfere makes me think that him and Sebek more than likely had a staged fight on their ship. Basically, Harald respected Rocks enough to let him go to God Valley unharmed, but still made it look like he had tried to stop him. It would be a really cool moment from both characters, where Sebek would have earned Harald's respect by actually being vulnerable with him. But Harald was also smart enough to realize that he couldn't just publicly let Sebek go. With Shakky's kidnapping, I think pretty much everyone who read the chapter must have come to the same conclusion, that the government bribed Ochoku to make it happen. The thing that this made me think is that if Ochoku was willing to cooperate with the government, I wonder why he never became a warlord of the sea in the future. He was likely strong enough for the title, and we know he later ruled Pirate Island, so he could have basically done what Doflamingo and Bucky did, and ran his own pirate business in the New World without being pestered by the Marines. The only real answer I was able to come up with is really out of the left field, where maybe Ochoku is a character like Micah Bell, where he is a criminal, but a criminal who is still willing to use law enforcement to his advantage. Or maybe Ochoku had just learned from personal experience and didn't want to become a warlord because it potentially meant going to war with Whitebeard, Kaido or Big Mom. I also wonder if Ochoku literally just followed Sebek's word and stayed on Pirate Island while the rest of the crew sailed to God Valley, and this is how the island later became his territory. Big Mom's line in this chapter about getting devil fruits for her kids did make me wonder if beyond the dragon fruit, some of the Big Mom pirates' fruits were originally from God Valley. As an example, Pudding's, Brule's, Oven's and Katakuri's fruits are really unique, so it definitely wouldn't be surprising if they originally were celestial dragon treasures. I think it's really sweet how distraught Gloriosa is at Shakky's kidnapping, and how relieved she is when later finding out that she's alive. But what I definitely did not expect was that Shiki of all the Rocks pirates is Shakky's biggest simp.
And who's that? Oh, it's Mr. MVP! Simp!
It kind of makes me wonder if he might have years later had ulterior motives during the Ed War, where maybe conquering the world with Roger was just a facade, and Shiki in truth just wanted an excuse to kick Rayleigh's ass. One huge revelation in this chapter that really put the stakes for the God Valley incident on a whole other level is that Gunko was on the island, since this should mean that Imu could have done exactly what he did on Elbaf, and taking control of her body during the incident. I honestly feel like this is almost certain to happen, since I really don't see any other reason why the story would have her be here. Since Luffy is literally going to be fighting this version of Imu right after this flashback, This would also give the story a huge opportunity to potentially show how far Luffy currently is from guys like Sebek and Roger during the God Valley incident. Summers being revealed as having been on God Valley is less surprising, since we already knew he had history with Kaban, but like with Gunko, this is also a great way to showcase how strong Summers is before his upcoming fight on Elbaf, where I am still pretty damn sure he is going to be Sanji's opponent for the arc. It's also pretty funny that unlike Summers and Jupiter, there is also another member of the Shepherd family revealed here, who just looks like your average celestial dragon slob. Or who knows, maybe this is Jupiter in his youth, and he decided to really get in shape after Roger one-shot him on God Valley. A few videos ago, I literally made a comment that Morgans would probably start a war with his newspaper if given the chance, but I really did not expect that he'd do it just a couple chapters later. Maybe the magazine is a family business, kind of like the Hearst family from real life. Though say what you will about him, Morgans at least still hasn't started a literal war with his paper, though he probably would if given the chance. My random theory on how Morgans is able to get so much intel is that his Saw and Devil Fruit somehow allows him to converse with birds, kind of like how Chopper is able to talk to animals, and that these seagulls basically spy on the whole world for him. I know Saw and Fruits don't normally work like this, but I'm just out of ideas on what else it could be. This could also later explain how Morgans was able to know that Roger had reached the final island, where the Roger pirates most definitely did not just announce it to the whole world. Morgans is already one of the most fun and unique characters in the whole story, and him literally starting wars when he should be in middle school really just makes me like him even more. One more stray observation I have about this chapter before the cover story is that the line about Shakky's kidnapping grinding the world's economy to a halt for several weeks is hilarious. I really don't know what Hancock is supposed to have on Shakky. Even Momonga would probably have to stab something more than just his hand to keep his cool around her. My only observation about the cover story is that Yamato is very much following in the footsteps of other Conqueror's Haki users in the manga. My take for a few years now has been that literally every Conqueror in the story is either someone incredibly ambitious or someone with a great ability to lead, or both. Even though Yamato isn't particularly ambitious, these scenes where Ulti and Page 1 are already so at ease with Yamato really to me show that Yamato is a natural leader, and we were already given small hints of this in the Wano arc. I really don't know what else there is to do for this cover story, since Yamato has now pretty much completed Kinemon's pilgrimage. The ballsy move would be for Yamato to just become a captain of a pirate crew, but I kind of doubt the manga wants to stop milking the Yamato for Straw Hat fan discussion just yet. Now, it's been a while since I've done this, but here goes. Arr, it's time I plunder your wallet by making you a member of this channel. Just look up on my current list of victims, since you will now be joining them by clicking the join button. I hope I can one day do a proper pirate accent. Anyway, thanks to the current members for their support, and thanks to everyone else for watching this video to the end.